Namaskar and welcome to this session of Sahitya Akademi's Festival of Expression, Asia's largest international literature festival. It is also often said literature is not just written in ink, but in trust, memory, and the shared spirit of humanity. In this session entitled Literature as a Soft Power in Global Diplomacy, we'll explore how literature works as a bridge between nations and cultures, how it influences, connects, and shapes global dialogue in its own quiet but powerful way. And to guide us through this, we have with us an exceptional panel of writers, poets, and scholars, and diplomats whose work itself is a testament to the power of words in shaping relations across the world. Chairing this session is Sri Suresh Goyal ji. May I invite you on the dais, please? Mr. Goyal is a former diplomat, although once a diplomat, always a diplomat. He has represented India across the world and continues to contribute to global cultural dialogue. Professor Abhay Maurya is an eminent academic, former Vice Chancellor of the Central University of English and Foreign Languages, and an acclaimed author and scholar of Russian and Indian literature. Dr. Guillermo Rodriguez, kindly join us on the dais, please. He is an eminent scholar, author, and translator, and the founder of Casa de la India in Spain, a cultural bridge builder and biographer of A.K. Ramanujan, whose work has strengthened Indo-Spanish ties. He has 25 books to his credit, spanning Indian English literature, and he has been conferred with the Friendship Award by the Ministry of External Affairs of India for his contribution to Indo-Spanish cultural relations. Mami Yamada, kindly join us on the dais. She is an accomplished Japanese writer with 20 books to her credit, many translated into English and Chinese. Her recent work on Indian culture has been recognized as the Good Book of Travel 2025. She also serves as director of the Japan-India Association and visiting professor at IIT Hyderabad. And last but not least, we have with us Zdravka Eftimova, a renowned Bulgarian fiction writer whose stories have traveled to over 32 countries, becoming part of school curricula in the US and Europe. She is the recipient of the Dr. T. O'Connor Sloan Prize, various other prizes. Her works like Thursday, In the Town of Joy and Peace, and You Can Smile on Wednesdays have touched readers worldwide. So it's over to Goyal sir.
For the next 1 hour, I would request, please forget your mobiles, keep them on the silence. We will try to be as brief as we can, but the issue is really very, very huge. So do forgive us if we are not brief, but we will try and finish it in the next 1 hour definitely. And I also know that this being the last session of the day, you will all be very anxious to get back to your hotels and begin to enjoy the evening. I can only promise to you one thing, that you will find this last session to be even more enjoyable than the evening you will have in the hotel. As you know, Bihar is a dry state now. There is nothing else that you can look forward to. Okay, so there we go. Thank you very much, first of all, that you're all here. I was actually thinking that being the last session, whether we will have some people in the hall or not, but that really truly demonstrates आप मैं इंग्लिश में कंफर्टेबल है या हिंदी में बोलूँ मिक्स्ड चलिए तो आई एम वेरी हैप्पी बिकॉज कम से कम इतना विश्वास मेरे को है कि अभी भी यहाँ पर कुछ लोगों को जिज्ञासा है, शौक है जानने का कि लिटरेचर का मतलब क्या है आफ्टर ऑल. I mean, since morning we have been talking about literature, literature, literature. But why literature? And some of you who might have been there in the morning inaugural session would remember, I think it was a very, very poignant sentence used by Honorable Governor Arif Muhammad Khan ji when he said that monuments to the thoughts or the ideas is the word that he used, or the minds, are far more important than the monuments that you build on the ground. Why? Because after all, a man or a woman, a human being, or even the animals, God has gifted them with a mind. And the mind creates thoughts. This is how they express themselves. And when I want to establish a connection with you or here, how do I do it? I do it through my thoughts. I express my thoughts, and the literature is nothing but an expression of thoughts on the paper in the language that you know. And therefore, I would really feel that if you want to establish a connection between societies, if you want to build true monuments to the ideas, then literature is the only way. And having said this, I'm not an author. I only do global diplomacy. I'm a retired diplomat. Fortunately, the government of India retired me. They didn't want any more nonsense. So there I am. I'm talking to you, diplomacy. But diplomacy, not just any diplomacy, but really what the diplomacy is all about. I have a very favorite example of describing diplomacy or cultural diplomacy. You would have noticed yourselves that the same idea, the same thoughts, when you convey to somebody, there is resistance, they may not understand what you're saying, they may oppose you, etc., etc., etc. But somebody else who is closer to them suggests the same idea, and there is far greater receptivity. Now, why is the communication from one person, same idea, same way, same format, is so much more acceptable than the others? That is where the culture and the literature comes in, because with literature, you are able to establish that kind of communication, understanding, and that connectivity. Nowadays, every government, चाहे वो यहाँ के चीफ मिनिस्टर हों, हमारे प्रधानमंत्री हों, या इवन ट्रंप साहब भी बात करते हैं कनेक्टिविटी की. The most important connectivity is the connectivity of the human minds. And to talk about that connectivity, we have 4 authors here. They have been already introduced to you. Without coming much in the way, I'm going to invite them one by one. My request is that please don't open the door again and again. Those who want to leave now, leave now. Otherwise, stay for 1 hour of intensive conversation. And request to all the panelists, initial remarks, if you can please limit to 5 minutes. Because my process would be that after you have spoken, we will have a conversation among the panelists. You can exchange your views, ideas, and in the last 15-20 minutes, I will request the members of the audience to join in the conversation. It does not have to be a question. सवाल मत पूछिए आप, जो आपके मन में ख्याल आ रहा है कि गलत है, सही है, क्या है, आप बोलिए, खुल करके बोलिए. हिंदुस्तान में खुलकर बोलने की आज़ादी सबको है अभी भी. ठीक है, चलिए. तो मैं अभी शुरू करता हूँ. डॉक्टर मोरिया, you can speak from here, from there, wherever. In the next 5 minutes, just feel free to say what you want on the issue.
Thank you, Ambassador Goyal. Well, the topic is vast, and to sum it up in 5 minutes would be a gigantic topic, a gigantic task. Topic formulated as given in this booklet is literature as a soft power and global diplomacy. As I understand, the topic is role of literature in molding the global diplomacy, in formulating or helping it evolving, particularly between two countries. I quite appreciate the formulation and would like to confine myself to the literary mutuality. Mutuality is an important word in diplomacy. Literary mutuality as it obtained between Russia and India. You know, India is getting punished these days because our closeness to Russia is not to Putin, to Russia. And why this closeness has obtained over the years, that is the question. There the role of literature as soft power is no small. I would like to also mention that literary currents between India and Russia started way back in 17th century. But initially the currents were from India to Russia. Probably this is an amazing thing that India was under the colonial subjugation. Nevertheless, currents that that impulses of Indian literatures were traveling to Russian literature, not the other way around. In the entire 18th century and even in the 19th century. Reason is that literature, there is a theory of borrowing. Which literature borrows? It is not a question of borrowing. What happens is, in 18th century, we were under the subjugation of colonial powers, and our literatures were almost dormant. They were not growing as much as they should have. But Russian literature in 19th century, 18th century was very active. It was, the theory is, the borrowing between literature is not a very simple borrowing as we see in life. For borrowing, there is something called, there has to be reciprocal currents. The borrower may have something, the giver or sending literature may have something to give, but in order to go into another literature, the receiving literature has to be prepared for that. It has to receive a particular stage in its development to receive those impulses coming from the other literature. Well, Indian literature was an ancient literature, is an ancient literature. We had a lot of accumulated material in Indian literature right from the ancient times. But Russian literature became active in 18th and 19th century, more in 19th century. So also, since we were under the British rule, Russian writers were all of them were very sympathetic to India, to the plight. They were very sympathetic to the plight of Indian people under the British rule. Several of them, since I don't have the time to go into the concretes, several of them, I may mention some names, wrote, and some part I may read, that wrote about how they felt. In fact, this should be seen in the background of British writers, how they looked at India at that time. For them, we were very, mean people. The word used, I'm quoting from the words of John Mill and other British indologists. They called us mean people, mendacious people, people who are not developed. They were looking down upon Indians. They almost hated Indians, but they wanted to trade with India and train Indians like them to become their servant and supporters. For them, the aim was different. But for Russia, the aim was another of a different type. They really sympathized with us. I would like to quote, for example, one writer. He says, Well, anyway, quoting will what you call complicate things. You know, they were saying that Indians had the ancient writings like Yajurved, Vedas, and Upanishads. What did you have? They were asking the question of the British, and you are torturing them. You are causing them such immense harm, and you look down upon them, and you treat them like animals, and they were much more cultured. That is the attitude of Russian writers. One writer, for example, he translated Shakuntala from, though it came via English, into Russian, and he also read Kalidas and says about Kalidas. I would like to quote that thing. Kalidas, writer's name was Nikolai Karamzin. He says, he translated Kalidas's Shakuntala into Russian in 1792 and provided it with a remarkable preface. And I quote part of that preface. The creative spirit does not lie in Europe alone. It is a citizen of the universe. Man is everywhere a man. Everywhere he has a sensitive heart, and in the mirror of his manifestation, imagination, he holds both heaven and earth. And then says, about Kalidas he says, Kalidas was greater than Homer. And then he says, the West is not the only place where wisdom thrives. So such was the attitude of, and then later on, so many Russian poets translated Indian poems, and they wrote poems taking the impulses from Indian works. They created poems on the Indian impulses, like Life of Buddha. There are several poems. There are Indian girls wading in a pond. You know, in Kartik month there is a poem, and so on and so forth. And thereafter came Tolstoy. Tolstoy, you know, was a giant. He was a titan, and he in fact took great interest in India. You know, there was a correspondence between Mahatma Gandhi and Tolstoy, extensive correspondence. And not only with Mahatma Gandhi, several Indians used to correspond with Tolstoy. And then Tolstoy took Indian motifs from Panchatantra and Hitopadesha, kind of adapted them into Russian for Russian children to read, on Buddha, on so many things. Of course, he would change the name, Indian names into Russian names. And so what I am trying to say, that is because of this phenomenon, we have such warm relations with Russia. That is why diplomatically we are so close to Russia, whether it was Russia under Soviet rule or Russia without Soviet rule, after Soviet rule. The legacy continues, traditions continues, and with these words, I would like to, I think I took 5 minutes, and if I had a whole paper, it runs into 17 pages, but I had to briefly convey, because thereafter comes the October Revolution, and after October Revolution, the currents reversed the direction. We started borrowing from Russia for various reasons. Many Indian writers came under the influence of October Revolution. In all the languages, be that Hindi, Telugu, Bengali, all of us who came under the influence of Gorky and other writers, and our writers and poets welcomed the October Revolution wholeheartedly, warmly, and many, even the revolutionaries like Bhagat Singh, you know, he was under great influence of October Revolution. And last book when he's reading, when he was being led to be hanged, and he was reading a book. The book's name was two step forward and one step backward by Lenin. And the police wala came and Sardarji, chaliye aapka time ho gaya. He says, wait, a revolutionary is meeting another revolutionary. So such have been the contacts between India and Russia, and that is the reason why we have so strong affinity diplomatically with Russia, and no Trump and nobody else can shatter it. Thank you.
I must say, I didn't want to stop you from, you were in good flow, but unfortunately, we have the time constraint. But maybe mic is on. Maybe you can give the paper to Sahitya Academy if they want to use it, yes. But one thing is very clear, and I also remember from my childhood days, that Russian literature has been translated into practically all the Indian languages. And my first exposure to War and Peace was in Hindi, with which I'm comfortable. But anyway, we will discuss more of that later on. Guimo, my dear old friend, you want to speak from there? Or? Either way.
Thank you so much, Suresh. I'll try and stick to the 5 minutes, so you can stop me at any time. Yes, so the topic is obviously very vast. Literature as a soft power and global diplomacy. And I would like to here distinguish between what happens naturally, organically with literature, and what countries, because we're talking about power and global diplomacy, so that implies that we are talking of nations and cultures that actively promote their literatures as some way of getting closer or actively branding their countries. But obviously, literature travels without anyone doing anything, because that's how literature, it's an ecosystem, and you all know that ideas have traveled through literature. I would very briefly also want to convey the idea of the different understanding of the concept. What is literature? In Latin, literatura means or comes from litera, which is letter, a letter, A, B, C, D. So it refers to the written as well as the spoken, the signifier and the signified. But, you know, in Saussurean terms, you're all familiar with linguistics, Saussure, Ferdinand de Saussure, signifier and signified. So it's related to the alphabet also. So it implies the written. Interesting. You have the concept, beautiful concept of Sahitya, which implies to some extent also Sahitya and Vidya. So Sahitya is association of or composition of ideas through words, signified, meanings, how you combine meanings. That's very important because it implies the concept of connectivity. In the concept itself, it's more related to the signified, not so much to the written, to the word that's on the page, because you're coming from a very ancient tradition of oral literatures as well, and the Sruti and Smriti. So the word Sahitya is such a beautiful concept because it implies at the same time the shared tradition, the composite view of a society. And I think that's a very crucial difference of how you understand, and also very much linked to the poetic composition, the lyrical in Sahitya. Now, very quickly, 3 or 4 examples, because there's not much time. How oral traditions have traveled, we all know, the folk tales, they travel, they are transformed. Because there's a third component, signifier, signified, but you need the context. Context. So wherever the story travels, the context may change, it's adapted, so we have different versions of tales. I give you an example. Beautiful example of how stories traveled, Panchatantra. Through the Arabic world, how they reached. Panchatantra influenced so many authors in Spain via the Mediterranean. You know that we had the connection with the Moorish world, and through Islam, a lot of ideas, everything, even mathematics, zero, everything traveled. That's one interesting example of how ideas traveled, and there was no diplomacy behind it. It just happened. But it has bound us together without knowing it. But also the other way around. Ibn al-Arabi, who was from Murcia in Spain, current Spain, Andalusia, his ideas of Sufism traveled and influenced the Sufis on this side. Even Rumi, from Spain, Sufism in those days traveled the other way. So there were these paths which were beyond cultures. There were no borders, there were no frontiers, there was no cultural diplomacy. The next step is the classics. Obviously, Shakespeare, Quixote, Don Quixote, they were translated as texts. So you already had the written text, and they were translated. And there was, some politics already, to some extent, involved, whether, it was translated from the French or the British and so on. And also ideas traveled. Calderón de la Barca, the 17th century, got a lot of ideas from the idea of Maya. So all these ideas, because there were also scholars interested in the classical thoughts of India. But moving on to the 20th century, and this is interesting as far as Spain is concerned, because of ideological reasons, the authors here are García Lorca, Neruda, later Octavio Paz, Gabriel García Márquez, because they were from the south. They were from South Latin America, except for Lorca, and Lorca was also pre-fascism. So there were these ideas how they traveled, because and in Kerala, García Márquez is so popular. A lot of people think García Márquez is Malayali. So believe me, and DC Books, Ravi DC is not not yet reached, but he's coming tomorrow. They have this understanding of this ecosystem of magical realism. And of course, we have a lot of authors who have connected this world, where the context also works. But to finish, if there is one author, writer, genius, who is the epitome of the real inspirer and pioneer of literature, soft power, and global diplomacy, it is Rabindranath Tagore. Rabindranath Tagore is the best known scholar, author, poet in Spain. He traveled through the poetry translation of Juan Ramón Jiménez. And he traveled extensively. He wanted to connect Asia and Europe. And not sufficient scholarly work has paid attention on his concept of literature and culture as a whole, but specific literature as a soft power and global diplomacy. I have attended several conferences on Tagorean studies in the East, in Russia, in Poland, in Spain. Everybody, Tagore is loved and known, and he understood the power. Even before United Nations was created, he had this idea of having a United Nations of writers, poets, because they're the ones we have to listen to, not the politicians sitting in United Nations. So on this positive note, I have not dwelt into what countries do, but what authors, writers, and the natural, organic way of doing diplomacy through the arts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gurmod. I must admire you for the brevity, the conciseness, and the precision of the thoughts you wanted to convey. Thank you very much indeed. I just wanted to say one or two things before we move forward. You started literature with the idea of letters. I would think the letters are probably an impediment in the way of the literature. I will explain later on. But from that point of view, we all know about the cave paintings. They are the earliest expressions, even in the primitive. They were the earliest expressions of creative endeavor from the people who were living in the caves. Does it mean that they require less merit or they merit less consideration from us than what we are writing nowadays? If that's the case, then what about Chinese writings? They're all hieroglyphics. They're all pictorials. And they're very rich. in terms of their own literature. So I think we need to really talk about the literature in the sense of ideas. I go back to the same thing. And number two, really, you mentioned Tagore, my favorite too. I had mentioned earlier Tolstoy, Gorky. I have not read Japanese authors, Badam, but I'm sure there, if I have the opportunity. But I didn't want to get into the names simply because, given the kind of political environment, it tends to become rather jingoistic. Oh, you mentioned so-and-so name, why not the other names? Therefore, there are so many names, even in India. What about Vikas Sarup's Q&A? Is it any less of a literature than anything that we've seen? Because it does describe the people who are living in the slums in Mumbai and their ideas. Anyway, plenty of that really. Madam, your turn. You can speak from here or where.
Namaskar. But because I am a Japanese, I would like to say hello in Japanese. Konbanwa. Konbanwa is actually after the sun is set. And I can't see, this room has no window, so I can't see if it is dark outside or not. So if it is still, we still have light, then it is konnichiwa. Okay, anyway. And let me just briefly explain about my name, because talking about or thinking about the language, it maybe gives you some idea. My name is Mami Yamada, but Mami is my given name, my first name, and Yamada is my surname. Mami is my name. It sounds very funny, isn't it? But it has nothing to do with mother. It has nothing to do with your mother's brother's wife or whatever. It's a very Japanese girl's name, means Sundari. Thank you. But that's my name, not myself. And also Yamada. Yamada is actually a set of two words, Yama and Da. Yama means mountain, and Da is rice field. Mountain and rice field. So it's a very typical scenery which can be seen everywhere in Japan. So, okay. Born as a Japanese and raised by a very typical Japanese parents who have never been abroad or who have never even thought about learning foreign language, I had a very hard time to learn a new language like English. It's so shocking to me when I first came to India to see how frequently or fluently people are speaking so many languages. Honestly speaking, I envy you. Because if you were born in a situation like Japan, it's going to be very hard to have your second language. Because it's not necessary. Nowadays, everything is changing, the society, world is changing, so now we are going to have to, we desperately need the second or third languages, but in those days, it was not necessary, because everybody spoke in our country only one language, which we call Japanese. So, what do you think? Can you believe? That's the only language you can live in. It means that you listen to Japanese only. You talk in Japanese only. You write and read in Japanese only. And you think and feel in Japanese only. Don't you think it's kind of boring for you? Because in India, because you are handling so many languages, you can jump from this one and this one, again, back to this one. It's not happening in my country. I'll tell you one interesting story about Japanese language. In our constitution, you'll be surprised to know that there is no mention about our official language at all. It's not written anywhere, believe me. But isn't it strange? Like, it's a very important part in the constitution, actually, in most of the countries, I think. But in Japan case, they didn't put the name of the language as official language. You know why? Do you think they just forgot to put it when they wrote constitution? No, they didn't forget. Actually, what happened was they didn't mention it in the constitution because it was a matter of fact thing that Japanese is our only language. So they thought it was not necessary to put it in the constitution. So it's so funny, but we don't have anything about the official language in our constitution. So the strange situation. Well, last 10 years, I have taught Japanese culture at IIT Hyderabad. And from next year, actually, I'm coming to IIT Guwahati also. But it's interesting, I'm teaching culture, Japanese culture, for those who are good at mathematics, chemistry, and physics. It's fun. And last time when I came here to Hyderabad to teach, for some reason, on Monday, for some reason, students looked very tired and exhausted, maybe because they had too many assignments or something. So I was asking them, okay, today you look very tired, so let's do something which we have never done before. And they were like, oh, Professor, what are you going to do for us? So I told them, okay, at first in the class, let's sing a song of Doraemon. You know Doraemon, yes? Everybody, all the students of mine are deeply in love with Doraemon and other Japanese animes and mangas. So their eyes started to shine. Okay, let's sing a song. They sounded like small children. And then we started to sing in big voice. And suddenly, we realized that everybody is singing something different. But Doraemon is just one robot. He must speak in one language, but some Doraemon was singing in Hindi, some in English, some in Marathi, some in Bengali, Assamese, Tamil, Malayalam. So many different languages were heard. So everybody was like, what? They didn't know that Doraemon was actually translated into so many languages in India. They thought that they were talking about the same thing, same language, but actually no. We were using the different languages. So I was very surprised, but at the same time, the students was also surprised, and we all came to know that the language, what we believed, that that's, how can I explain? We believed that we were thinking or singing this time, singing in the same language, but actually we were using different language, and it was important to notice where we were. Like as I told you before, in a country like India where so many languages are working, you are jumping from this one and this one. And Doraemon one was a very interesting example. Well, these are the things I have experienced in India. There are so many more things, but I think already 5 minutes? It's okay, maybe. Do you want me to talk something in particular? Entirely up to me. You want to just one more? Okay, okay. Let's talk about. Is it too early to talk about the Nobel Prize thing? Nobel Prize? Yes. Okay, because some time ago, earlier today, someone was asking me, have you ever had any Japanese authors who got the Nobel Prize? Kawabata, yes, you know very well. Yes, Oe, two authors, both male authors. One is Kawabata. Kawabata won the award, I think, in the year 1968 or something, long time back. And Oe, 1994, I think. So that's it. And we are thinking maybe someday Murakami Haruki would get one. That's what some people are thinking. And I don't know, heaven knows. I think actually thinking that Murakami could write in English. That's what I thought, but I was checking it on internet, and it seems that he is writing only in Japanese. But he is good at English also. He translated Great Gatsby into Japanese. So he can write in English, I think, sometime in the future. And let's see what's going on. I think that's it. Maybe I will, if you have some question, please ask me later on. Thank you so very much. And at the end, I have to say goodbye in Japanese language. Do you know how to say goodbye? Hi, you know very well. You say sayonara, but actually it's sayonara. And sayonara, the actual literal meaning is if it is so. It has nothing to do with goodbye. Actually, it means if it is so. Okay, sayonara. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for being here. I'm from Bulgaria. It's one of the most beautiful countries in the world. So, speaking of literature as soft diplomacy, I'll start with a very, very short poem by a Bulgarian poet, Georgi Konstantinov. A bird perched on a tree. A bird perched on a tree. It is a rare moment when the bird has roots and the tree has wings. It is what literature does for us. It gives us both roots and gives us wings. It makes us human beings capable of feeling pain and happiness for people in different countries, for people in India, for people in Bulgaria, everywhere in the world. And I teach creative writing at Sofia University, and I gave them a topic which I took from Rabindranath Tagore. He says, you cannot cross the sea by sitting on the shore and looking at the waters. It was so unexpected for my students that finally we went and looked for what he has written and for all he meant to the world, because he was the first non-European writer, a poet from India, who in 1913 won the Nobel Prize in Literature. Speaking of literature as diplomacy, the most powerful diplomacy in the world, as soft power, I'll give you a very short example. In the beginning of my career, I was a teacher not in a small village. I was supposed to teach the students Shakespeare. Well asked, who is Shakespeare? Well, some English old man, they said. An old man, and they said, okay, what did he do? I said, he wrote some plays. Why should we study him? Don't we have Bulgarian dramatists? And I said, okay, we do have wonderful Bulgarian dramatists. But he lived, let's say, in the 16th century. But he's dead now, they said. I said, oh yeah, he's quite dead and cold. And they told me, why should we study a dead and cold old man? And I said, because he's a genius. They said, but we are all geniuses, all of us are geniuses here. Well, you see this very high level of self-esteem. And I said, okay, I read what he wrote in Romeo and Juliet about love. And I said, okay, this guy must have been in love with a Bulgarian girl. So you see the power of, the soft power of literature, which is in fact the strongest power in the world, because literature is the shortest distance between human hearts. Why am I saying this? Because I asked my students at that time, they were, let's say, 16-year-olds, no, 15-year-olds, to make a short play based on Shakespeare, just enact Shakespeare's play, A Midsummer Night's Dream. And I say, who wants to play? Who wants a role? Who wants a part? And nobody wanted a part. Who wants a part again? If you want a part, you'll get an excellent mark. No one wanted an excellent mark. Who wants a very good mark? No one. Everybody wanted a good mark that will let them pass on. Finally, after a very long time, I found 6 people to participate in this play. 6 people, 6 of my students. And the day when the play had to be, well, shown to the public of the small village came. We did not have a special theater building. We did not have a big room. We had, well, a room as big as that, like that, here, there, up to there. And you can imagine how many people came. All the village, all the neighboring villages. There were so many people, like about 500 or let's say 550. And you know, water started dropping from the ceiling. So many people. And one lady, a very tall and strong lady, came and said, hey, teacher, you're torturing our children with a dead man. We have very good Bulgarian plays. I said, okay, just look at this. She said, mind you, I don't want you to torture my grandchild. And her grandchild was one of the leading actors. So the performance started. Why I'm speaking of diplomacy now. Culture as diplomacy. Well, I told them, guys, don't do any belly dancing here. It was an Englishman. They did not have belly dancing at that time in Elizabethan England. They said, okay. They played so wonderfully, with such good English, no foreign accent in their English. And after all, when the play was finished, they did some belly dancing, which was awful. But, you know, all these 550 people stood up and said, hooray, you're great, you are really geniuses, kids. Bring Shakespeare here. We are going to buy him some rakia, which is brandy, very sharp Bulgarian brandy. We are going to give him a bottle of our best brandy. I'll give him my finger that my grandmother gave to me because he wrote that for my grandchild. So the performance was a great success. As literature is not only the soft power, it is the hardest power, diamond power. So, what happened after this performance was this old lady, she was about 93, not about, she was 94, but she was big. And she said, she came to me and said, took me by the shoulders and said, "Hey, teacher, tell me what you want. I'm going to steal it for you." And I said, "Oh, come on. This performance here is to show you how talented your children are, how great talent they possess, and how they could make a dead man that for 300 centuries come alive here." And she said, and she told me, "I wish he were alive. I'll ask him to be my guest, and I'll make him pancakes for dinner. And my pancakes are the best in Bulgaria," she said. So what happened later, well, after that I changed schools because they saw that it was this play was such a success that they transferred me to a very famous school. And when I started traveling to this new school, all my students said, "Eftimche," my name is Eftimova, my family name, my surname. They said Eftimche, it means little Eftimova. I'm not little, as you see. Eftimche, stay here. Don't go to these guys. They don't know who Shakespeare is. But they not only knew, they were perfect, they were excellent. But what I'm telling you this, to prove that literature is really the strongest power in diplomacy. 2 months ago, I went in Chicago to speak to, well, university students about contemporary Bulgarian literature, about how much talent there is in Bulgaria. Enormous talent, I can assure you. I wish you'd come to my classes.
This is very interesting, but...
Yes, finishing. That's it. And I met one of my lead actors there who played, and he just had founded a theatrical company in which participated Germans, Polish, Americans, and I think some Russians people too. This is what makes me believe in the power of literature. Thank you.
Thank you very much, madam. Just now when you told me I finished, I felt like one of your students who were questioning the Romeo and Juliet. And yes, I'm saying I felt like one of those students in front of you who is being reprimanded for not understanding something very nice. Okay. Okay. Thank you. I think we have just about 15 minutes left now. So without further ado, I'm going to start a conversation amongst the panelists, and I'm going to request that rather than separately, the members of the audience, if they have a comment or anything, they may please come in. All I just wanted to say here one or two things. In Indian spiritualism, we also believe that there is a level of love, understanding, accommodation, when the words become immaterial. When the words written or spoken become immaterial, the understanding is so intense that just by looking at each other, you know what the other person is thinking. Now, is that not the purpose of literature? And if that is the case, does literature have to be limited to words or the language? Is it possible to have literature which transcends languages? After all, you have the artificial intelligence these days. I know people are going to scoff at it, but the fact is, you have the artificial intelligence which creates literature almost, not quite, but which tries to duplicate or replicate Shakespeare. So are the words important or the ideas important? I think that is one thing. And if that's the case, is translation an important way of obliterating or eradicating the boundaries between the different areas of literature? That is number one. And number two, Madame mentioned about the Nobel Prize for the Japanese authors. I do think that we don't have enough incentives or awards for good literature. After all, how many authors from Africa, Southeast Asia, Europe there are quite a few, or Latin America, how many authors have been given Booker Award, Pulitzer Award, or sorry, Pulitzer is for journalism, but Booker or Nobel? How many? So is there a need to make it more broad-based, some incentive for authors to really come up with great writings? Those are just my ideas throwing around to start the conversation. And now it's free for all. Please start. Whoever is that. Guillermo, you want to say something? Madame? Yeah. You have a mic.
Is this working? Okay. Yes. Of course, there was, time is short, and I was talking about a particular way of connecting cultures and societies through, or an organic way of connecting stories, because literature are stories, right? And stories cannot be stopped, they just travel. A story needs to be told. It has to reach, some audience. But we should not forget that literature is also a market industry. Literature is an industry. It is, obviously. And a lot of awards, to refer to in our country and other places are very much connected also to, how much influence you have. I mean, you can look at the big industry, Frankfurt Buchmesse, and, all these fairs. There's certainly a strong market behind, and, people push and lobby whoever gets the Booker Prize, and there are lobbies for the Nobel Prize. And some people will say it's Eurocentric, and some people will say now it's the turn of, maybe a Spanish-speaking or Japanese. There's a lot of politics around that. But a beautiful example, I think, of how a mentality sometimes changes because you're using soft power as literature soft power in a positive way is what the Cervantes Institute has done, the Spanish Institute, because in the old days, they were specifically promoting only Spanish authors. Then they understood we have a population of 600 million Spanish-speaking Spanish speakers around the world. And, some politicians must have given it a thought, and then there were some authors and they had discussion. And nowadays, in the last few, decades, they have embraced not just Spanish authors from Spain, but Spanish authors from the entire Spanish-speaking ecosystem. And that's a very clever move, because now it's Hispanic America. And it includes also the power of Spanish in the USA. And look what some have been trying to do. They want to stop this because they think, they're taking away the influence of English. So certainly language and literature has a lot of power. And institutions are behind there, and certain institutions understand. But the more we embrace other traditions and other authors, so I think it's an interesting example.
Madam, may I come to you for a moment on this?
Oh.
Now, our dear friend mentioned about the Spanish, Latin America, that the Spanish Amaras have traveled to Latin America, spread the influence of Spanish. I didn't want to use the word colonization, but that is what it was. Do you think Japan has been remiss in not having quite gone that far?
Language-wise?
No, to other countries, spreading their influence, spreading their power.
You think so?
I'm asking you.
Yes, I think we have been doing well, but doing our best. But you know something? I want to focus on the language point. And as I told you, we have only one language, which is very limited. You have to see you have to know that you are very lucky to live in a country, the world where you are abundant of or big number of languages are. You have choices. But at the same time, I think it's going to be very hard to connect people at the same time. In our case, it's very easy to connect people. Society is so close because we are thinking in the same language all the time. So this is our situation. And giving the influence. Yes? Is it okay? Okay? I was not answering to your question. I'm sorry.
Unless you want to add something more.
No, it's okay.
And Dr. Moria, what do you think?
Well, literature was not always written. You know, you have the stage of folklore. In fact, literature, was born in syncretic poetry. Syncretic poetry, when the tribals were there, one group of tribals would fight with another group, and the victorious one would celebrate it. And then they would dance and sing without words also. And that's how literature was born. People didn't have the words even. They used to shout, howl, or tap the floor with their. That's how literature, various genres of literature were born. And at the stage of folklore, you have folk stories, you have folk tales, and we are all like our folk tales also, like our. I don't know whether when Panchatantra was created, I think it was Sanskrit, but it was spread to all the languages. But without languages also literature was there. But that was at the primitive stage of development of history. Later on, when the language came up and thoughts could be expressed in literature, language became inseparable part of literature.
And I would like to thank the organizers of Patna International Literature Festival for the opportunity to see and meet such wonderful writers and to have these discussions. And I would like to inform our friends of India that we have a Bulgarian writer who won Booker Prize. His name is Georgi Gospodinov, and he won it for his novel Time Shelter. So I would ask you to, if you have time, to read that novel. It is really wonderful. And again, thank you for your hospitality and for the opportunity to meet Indian people and find out Indian contemporary writers and build joint, perhaps, literature projects that would be successful.
Let me just please add just one more thing. If we talk about influence of the language from A to B, B to C, C to A, like that, there's very interesting sample in my country. We use Chinese letters, as I told you before, which is called kanji. And you will have an impression that kanjis were made only in China. Well, actually, it's true, but not true. The first bunch of kanji, many of them, hundreds and thousands of them, came to Japan first. And then Japanese people created so many new kanjis. And then they were all brought back to China and Korea and all those places, and we all used them. So once you say kanji, sometimes it's made in China, sometimes made in Japan in a later age. So it's like a catchball or something. And language is, of course, a living thing. It doesn't stay the same all the time. So it's one of the charming points of the language, I think.
Are there any remarks, any questions from the floor? We just have about 5 minutes left. Otherwise, we can wind up. Yes. Is there a microphone?
I want to add a new dimension to this literature. We are talking about soft power, global diplomacy, but we are not talking about sports.
Yes.
And the writing on sports, particularly cricket. How and Chandler Kaur's book on sports, how the West Indies has captured the
Quite right.
literary world with
Mhm.
the literary world with its literature on sports. For those of you who are cricket fans, there's an excellent book, literature by C.L.R. James,
Mhm.
who lived in England, wrote Beyond the Boundaries. It's a masterpiece of literature,
Yes.
but it has created tremendous soft power for the West Indies and Caribbean literature.
Yes. Regrettably, we don't have much time really to talk about all the issues. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Are there any other remarks from the floor? Is that it? Okay, good. Everybody is feeling sleepy. You wanted to say something?
Hello.
Yes. Okay. I thought you wanted to say something.
No, I just speak.
No, I'm just saying that obviously we have not spoken about particular authors and how influential they can be. And there's V.S. Naipaul, for example, and so many authors that Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who suddenly you know about what happens in a particular country. So you have a very right point, because authors are also ambassadors of their culture and of their ethos, and they're not necessarily, they're also sometimes hybrid. V.S. Naipaul is a good example. So it's maybe not a bad idea to lobby for an award that's given by, because after all, yes, the Nobel Prize is something which comes from Europe and Northern Europe, very far away. Why not? Sahitya Academy can institute an international award for, and it's an excellent idea. And you have to, and it's a very excellent idea, and I think you should go for it, because I would like to add to what my colleague has said. This is such a unique gathering of, I don't know if you should call it festival or whatever, but it's one of its kind. You have over 500 and whatever authors from all kinds of the corners, and it's what I love about this event is diversity. It's really truly diverse. So bring in the diversity angle into an award which stands for its own and given by the Indian Academy, which is the largest diversity anywhere in the world in one country.
Friends, the main topic of today's discussion was literature as a soft power in international diplomacy. But today I am sorry to be prophet of doom. The technology, the AI, is threatening the very existence of literature. In literary theories, we have death of a reader, sometimes death of an author, sometimes death of the language, etc. In postmodernism, for example. But now, because of this AI, the very literature is under threat. And I don't know what diplomacy will do with it.
In that case, as a diplomat, I will have the last word here. And that last word is that there have been many prophets of doom all along the ages, from the Stone Ages onwards. At one time, we thought the nuclear war is going to obliterate the world. It didn't happen. Doom ain't going to happen. Trump has not been able to bring doom to the world. He has tried very hard. But anyway, therefore, I'm quite optimistic that the new technology, I thought I had the last word. sorry. No, but I'm a diplomat. So, a new technology will bring its own idiom. There's no doubt about it. Probably what it will create will be completely different from what we have known so far. But the literature has changed. It has evolved over the years. Therefore, I'm not so pessimistic. Maybe, okay, I'll give you an example. My two children who grew up, they are now in 30s and 40s, late 30s. They don't read books anymore. They listen to iPods. And they say that it's so much simpler and so much more engaging to listen to those iPods, debates, everything. Now, who am I going to say that they are wrong and I'm right? I think we need to basically evolve with the times. And therefore, Dr. Moria, with all humbleness, all humility, I would say trust a diplomat. A diplomat has tried to.
That's very well said. Literature will die, but Sahitya will not die. And we all have to be hopeful for that. And there is no doubt that there is no other power than the power of literature, even on the global diplomacy level. I want to thank our panel very much for this wonderful conversation and so many thoughts that have been thrown up, especially the one about international awards by Sahitya Academy. I'm sure the powers that be are listening to this and they will do something about it. Thank you very much to the entire.
Special literature projects, translations.
And of course, special literature projects, translation projects. Thank you very much to the panelists. There are cultural programs going on. In fact, that's the reason why we have to wind up this session so quickly, because I'm sure you'd like to see some of the Indian culture as well. And we'll see you tomorrow here at this venue and of course at the other venues from 10:30 onwards, where you can see and participate in various literary discussions.